Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado video. Today, I'm joined by Natalie Menten, one of Colorado's Liberty leaders. Well, Natalie, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
Natalie, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say and see this presentation. I think this is one of the most insidious uses of taxpayer funds is for these government bureaucrats and consultants to use taxpayer money to try and convince the public to vote in ways that are really not beneficial to them on some level. So really excited to see this. I think this is a perfect time to get this information out there to people. We're seeing some real world examples happening in the Denver metro area where these greedy politicians are trying to use these overpaid consultants to take more of our tax money. So I'm really excited about this one.
All right, let's jump on in and we'll talk about public persuasion. And with all the years that I've been in politics, I have lots of hours in this kind of a subject. So let's jump in. Public persuasion, and as this cover slide, kind of describes it, arguments, communication, beliefs, proposals, lies, deception, all these different things. And when we get into discussing tax policy, how it's presented to the voter is really important because there's a lot of legal jargon, there's a lot of financial things. So what the public is able to pull out of that really makes a difference in how they end up voting. So as you may or may not know, for the viewers that are out there are thousands of taxpayer dollars that are spent on these consultants. And we're going to give you give a few examples here in this presentation. And this is just a small sampling. I mean, if I were to go out and pull all the governments of Colorado and put it into a spreadsheet and do a summary on the tabulation, we would be talking about enormous amounts of money. So let's go into these examples here. And describe, first of all, starting with, what are these contractors hired to do? So what I've got here is an actual taxpayer funded contract, in this case, Jefferson County, and it's for this 2024 tax hike that you and I've talked about a little bit. We're going to be talking about quite a bit more as that moves forward. And what they call in a contract, the definition of what the work is, it's called a scope of work, called shorthand SOW. As you can see here, in this certain specific contract, it has a strategic communications plan development, and it's working with not only staff, but the public in creating messaging and target audiences, messengers, key strategies and tactics, educational outreach plan. And we'll discuss later what educational might mean. There are lots of different outreach mechanisms that contractor is employing to be able to lay the foundation for what is going to be a ballot issue. Here's another page that describes that in a little more detail. The scope of work, again, in the same contractor with Jefferson County, it's reaching out to county leaders, stakeholders, gauging their enthusiasm and support for ballot issues. So what this is doing is basically laying out a campaign plan. And I'm not going to dwell on this too long because we've covered it once before. But basically, if you think about all the parts of a campaign, that's what these contractors are paid to do. And the sad part about that is it's not private money funding that. That is taxpayer money funding it. Moving on, here's another example. Also Jefferson County, but in this case, again, it's talking about consultants. This is the Jefferson County Housing Blueprint. Now, they've also employed contractors to be able to help relay their message. They've, in this case, reached some resistance because this plan that they're discussing is to increase subsidized government, taxpayer-funded, taxpayer-subsidized government managed housing. Sorry, I had to spit that out. A lot of words. It's been a few weeks since I had to say it. In this case, they're talking about the resistance, and what needs to occur is that the consultant needs to be able to soften the ground to be able to really get that public acceptance. And you see here, strategy for rollout, securing endorsements, softening the ground. In the same ways, this is a lot like a campaign. Consultants are paid to do this. How are consultants reaching the public? There's a variety of ways. One of them is commonly called is a push-pull. And it is a technique that actually really was discovered during Watergate. And somebody can look into that a little bit. But it's a negative campaigning technique in a lot of cases, usually by telephone or text message. And it's a method used to influence voters by asking about an issue, about a candidate, a ballot issue. And under that guise of that opinion poll, these contractors, consultants, usually they're using a subcontractor, multiple people feeding from this public money. There are loaded questions that are inserted within those set of survey questions to try to sway that voter. And when you're trying to sway a voter versus just really reaching their opinion, that means that you are using campaign mechanisms to sway their opinion and their thought process about something. So that goes well beyond just asking for their opinion of would you pay more in taxes or not, or would you vote for this person or another. This is a technique I'm going to cover really quick, and then we're going to jump into the good stuff, I think, after we cover a little more of this persuasion. The Delphi technique is a method that I became familiar with more than 15 years ago. And you'll see it in a lot of public planning meetings where these consultants, again, paid by taxpayer dollars, will host meetings. And in many cases, it's a very specific list of people who are asked to attend that meeting. It is even meant to present itself as you're very special and you're getting invited to this meeting because you're a leader in the community. And so people are persuaded into that because you are playing with their ego, essentially. You're called into a room. In many of the cases, the rooms where I've seen this employed, this technique, you're going to have about 30 to 40 people. And what they'll do is they'll have a facilitator running the meeting. The facilitator will open up the meeting and then do kind of an intro on what the tasks of the meeting are to be. Then they will break out people. A lot of times it'll be assigned, like we want these people to go to this table, this table, this table, and it'll be groups of like 10. And what that's meant to do is take those 10 people, take their individual opinions and sum them into a medium or average type of statement. So what you're already doing is somewhat suppressing people's voices within that type of an arrangement. Now, when Delphi was created, it was to really, a lot of it was marketing, and in the same sense, and that was for products, and it was tied to chemicals, and it's been a little bit perverted since then, and is used, I think, quite frequently in these groups where they want consensus from a group. Then what that consultant does with that information is then use that to be the statement from all of these leaders of the community feel that this should occur. Now, when the public is able to attend these meetings, here's the suggestions I would give. When they tell you to break into it like a certain group, don't necessarily pay attention to that. Go where you want to go. And when they go into these groups of like 10, trying to build this consensus, they will have a note taker. That's this typical process. Well, I will tell you, being the note taker has powers that we as activists should take advantage of. So I hate to even say this in a public video, frankly, but be the note taker, because that is the scribe, as they call it, that basically relays that message. And if you feel that somebody who's like an opposition type voice, meaning the minority perhaps at the table, I think people should get their table refund back. I think the government should, find some efficiencies. I think the government should tighten its belt. If those messages get squelched, you as a note taker, as that part of your duty, should basically have a minority report, is what that would be called, saying, you know what, we need to say, even though there was 8 people at that table that said, yeah, we'll raise taxes on people. By the way, we won't tell them we're really doing it. Then make sure that those 2, there are 3 of you, whatever, that voice is within the notes. So that's at the bottom here. Note takers have power. Don't sit back and be led. Be a leader at one of these things. And you're going to see this at all sorts of meetings. You're going to see it at tax meetings. You're going to hear it at like Front Range Rail Plan. They will have committees for that. All these different little government plans that they have. This is a technique that's used quite a bit. I probably talked about that a little bit too long, but it's something people can read about somewhere. So I feel like I'm rambling. Should I stop, Brandon?
No, I really appreciate all this context that you're providing and all this background information because I think people should be shocked and outraged at the fact that these politicians, these bureaucrats are hiring political consulting companies. These same companies that are running high dollar political campaigns, for candidates for office, maybe they've been doing it for years. They hire them using taxpayer money to basically craft messaging to try and manipulate the public into supporting these tax increases. I mean, it should be outrageous. It should be shocking. They're not these politicians, right? They put some on the ballot because they want it to pass, and they're going to do everything they can, which includes hiring these people and develop using these tricky techniques, these kind of Madison Avenue or Washington D.C. style techniques to try and manipulate public opinion. And it's interesting to see how it's played out in practice. I'm sure most people out there have probably gotten one of those push pull phone calls. Have you heard of this politician? What would you say if you knew they supported this issue? Would that make you more or less likely? Or have you heard of this initiative? If it's going to fund X, Y, and Z, is it going to make you more likely to support it? And they're slowly trying to, it's supposed to be an informational survey. That's how they present it, at least, but it's really a way to try and manipulate the person on the other end of the phone to supporting that position. So some of this stuff is very insidious. It's very tricky, and people are used to it. I think people are really used to it when it comes from political campaigns and political candidates, but they've gone too far when they're using taxpayer money. And these elected representatives of the people are using these same techniques to try and manipulate the public. So I mean, it's shocking, and I appreciate you showing kind of some of the different ways that they do this.
Yeah, and that made me think of something that I didn't include these slides, but it's really important, is when they give these polls, they'll say, would you rather increase sales tax by 0.5%? Would you rather lose your Tabor refunds, or would you rather increase property tax? But they don't, one of the answers isn't tighten your belt. One of the answers is, I want my refund back. So they give you those choices. And then when they said, well, we polled 1,000 people and we said, how much would you support this? That's another thing, is it's like not yes or no. It's how much would you support? So I don't want to go into that, but because I think of a lot of people have encountered one of those where they're like, none of these answers are the one I want to give. Where am I able to fill in what I want to see, which is keep my taxes. I want to keep as much of my tax money as possible. Need it. Government, tighten your belt. Anyway, all right. So we're talking about public persuasion, and these next 30 slides are going to jump off just a little bit, but in the big scope of things, when we have paid consultants paid by taxpayer money, and they're the talking boxes, they've got the paid media, they've got the public information officer, essentially a campaign team, whether official or not. When the government is controlling messaging, that should be a concern for anybody, whether they are whatever side of the political spectrum they are, because whatever government's in power is the one that's controlling the information. It's notable that out of somewhere, maybe it's because of election discussions, I really can't say. Senate Bill 2484 passed this year, where we've got the Colorado Attorney General, who is to prevent mis and disinformation. And you know what? I don't really actually know, what one is purposeful and one is not purposeful. That's very subjective. All right. As to, we've discussed the variety of people. If you were to say, what color is the sky? You're going to get a variety of different answers, whether it's even different varieties of blue. We've got the Attorney General, and I don't think there's really a penalty in here if we find it, but the Attorney General is supposed to be preventing proliferation of factually inaccurate data. And I don't know how they're exactly going to do this. And you just look, again, we're going to cover this really quickly. But the Attorney General, who's probably got a busy job anyway, is now going to be in charge of determining if the public is sharing factually inaccurate data. And what's I think most disturbing to me, frankly, is them mentioning the schools in here, because now it's touching, and the attorney general is dictating thought with schools. I, as we go into this whole discussion again about public persuasion, I want to just cover that. And I don't know if you want to add something to that, Brandon. I know you covered this bill, which is just bizarre in how it's going to be created and quite scary. Go ahead.
Oh, totally ludicrous bill. I mean, on the plus side, this bill was much more expansive originally. I mean, these bill sponsors, Lorena Garcia, Lisa Cutter, and others, really wanted to create this entire Orwellian type of system for the entire state. It did get amended down just to cover schools. And like you said, schools is probably the worst way for them to do it because they can't really, we have the First Amendment, thankfully. We have a lot of ability to get information out there and kind of use our freedom of speech. But when government schools are involved, that's these taxpayer funded institutions. The state has a lot of control over them. So that's really who they're targeting with this bill, Senate Bill 84. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And I can't help but think I'm sure there's going to be some consultant out there who's going to get a contract to help them initiate this and develop these resources for these public schools to use to determine what's accurate and what's not. And you can just imagine that how politically connected they probably will be.
So, I grabbed the slide on this page here with this Ministry of Truth in 1984, and I'm sure there's some people are going to go like, you're dreaming up this going to be bizarre stuff. There's nothing to worry about this bill, but fine, you want to paint somebody as a little bit strange that they wonder, is there similarity here? It is absolutely as bizarre then that we have a state law that was passed where the attorney general is going to be the deciding person on whether somebody is sharing, again, whatever party you are. What a mess, Bill. So, all right, so I'll skip back here. Hopefully it doesn't skip forward too much because I got a little delay. Sorry. I have an older laptop I use for this. All right, so sorry. You can talk for a moment while I'm trying to get to the right slide here.
Hey, no worries. I was just going to
All right.
say, our wonderful authoritarian governor, one of the least favorite politicians in Colorado, Governor Jared Polis, signed this bill into law. He pretends to be some sort of moderate, liberty-minded individual, but when you see something like this, how could you possibly think that this is a pro-liberty piece of legislation? This having the state government collaborating with public schools and other people to try and determine and limit information that they find inaccurate. I mean, come on, people.
Be nice if we ever run into Jared, we'll have to ask him that question along with 50 other things on what he's doing. Um, so let's go back. I'll go back now. So that I jumped off, talk about the state government wanting to control what's said and what's not. Meanwhile, the government is paying consultants to persuade voters to do things. So we've talked before about the Bighorn Company, and whose partners are Ian Silveri and Mansur Gitfer. This is a company that Jefferson County hired to lay the foundation for a Jefferson County tabor issue. Earlier in this presentation, that scope of work that I was showing is the scope of work that Ian and Mansur, or Manny as I guess he goes by, are doing, and they're getting paid $20,000 a month. $20,000 a month. And yes, they've mentioned that gets broken up into subcontractors, and that's great. And we'll cover that in a moment here as to subcontractors and all that. $20,000 a month in taxpayer money to lay out options to raise our taxes, though we've said no twice in the last 5 years. And this contracts to total not to exceed $340,000. That's one example. I've got another one here, and it's not the easiest to read, but this is the second one in the second part of the bottom half of the slide here, where Arapahoe County taxpayers forked out $156,000 and change for the company called Public Alignment. Now, why do I want to do that and make sure I included that one? Just look at the name. We're talking about public persuasion, and the name of the company is Public Alignment. I don't know, that I think that's a pretty good, very descriptive name for a company that's going to steer. So, this is again a part of their work order where they are doing polls to test the bus, if you can see in the printer, test the potential ballot language based upon all the public feedback. Well, with the word I just heard on Arapaho is they actually, because of the way they worded it, they didn't like it the first time. So now they went out with a second poll to change the wording because they want to get to that result. And they will keep tweaking that language. That is, again, campaigning. That is not opinion research. That this is just outright evasion of campaign finance laws and state law. That's what these governments are doing. Go to the next one here. Here's
Yeah.
another consultant. Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick. I mean, people really need to see how insidious this is, right? They're shaping their ballot language. So it's not, this government's supposed to be this neutral entity, you would imagine, right? That's what we're supposedly taught in civics class, that the government's going to put something on the ballot. They're going to kind of present all sides and present it factual, and the voters can make up their mind. But no, they're using these high paid consultants to craft that ballot language, to make changes to it, to poll the public, to like you said, it's a total campaign. I mean, they're manipulating the language on the ballot so that it's more likely to pass using taxpayer money. I mean, absolutely should be illegal if it's not.
Yeah. And hopefully at some point some legislator will just pick it up, whatever side of the aisle. But uh, here's another consultant. And again, I live in Jeffco, so again, I'm just getting a sampling because I'm just like researching my neck of the woods, let's call it. This stuff goes on. It can't be just I would not imagine. I'm not a gambler, but I would not bet it's just Jeffco. This is stuff that goes on. We already showed it in Arapahoe. We know RTD's done it, school districts. Here's another messaging consult. Now, this goes back a little bit in history, but that's because, one, I didn't know that this occurred until recently. If I'd known then, we would have been doing videos about it. Let's just say that.